All right, what's up everybody? We are live. Today is Thursday, and we're doing Q&A today. So, as you know, I'm live right now on Instagram. I have my phone right here, but I'm going to be also recording on this camera for YouTube. So, I compiled basically all the questions that you've given me, and I just took a couple of them, the ones that I feel like I can answer the best for this week, and then I'm also going to be taking some of your questions in or on Instagram Live as well at the end after I answer these questions first. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So question number one, what is the best frame rate for filming slow motion? So when it comes to filming slow motion, the best frame rate, or not, I would say like the best frame rate, but the frame rate that is used for the majority of the time is 60 frames per second, and that is the majority of the slow motion clips that you see. The next frame rate that is used for majority of the time is 120 frames per second. That is when you get super slow motion, but for cameras, actually a lot of the cameras that I know of, 60 frames per second is used most of the time. So with that, obviously it includes setting up your camera so that the slow motion looks fluid, and in addition to that frame rate, your shutter speed. So setting up your shutter speed so that your footage will look smooth. So for example, shutter speed, for those that don't know about it, shutter speed basically it's that fraction that you see on your camera. So it can be 150, or you don't see it, but it looks like a 50, it's 60, but it's actually a fraction. You don't see it on your camera, but it's actually a fraction. Basically, that just means, how much motion blur is going to be seen within your image. So for example, if you're filming at 1/50th of a second shutter speed, which is basically, what I recommend when you're filming and you want to get the natural movement of your subject, that is my base point. I don't go below that or anything. The reason why is because if I go below that, the movement of the subject will be kind of blurry. It won't look natural. When you film at 1/50th of a second shutter speed, your eyes will naturally see the movement, the natural blurriness of the movement. But it's different when you're filming slow motion. So I'm not sure if it's for every single camera, but for a lot of the cameras that I've used, if I have my frame rate set at 60 frames per second and I set my shutter speed at its lowest is usually 60 or 1/60th of a second shutter speed. Most cameras won't allow you to go below that, or else if you play it back at slow motion, it's not gonna look smooth. You want the image and the video to look super smooth in its movements. So what I recommend when filming slow motion, if I'm filming at 60 frames per second, in terms of shutter speed, what I usually film at is 1/100th of a second. Sometimes I get away with 1/80th of a second, but usually the higher the shutter speed, the more of the movement that your camera is capturing in the video. So the higher shutter speed, the smoother your slow motion will look. So next question. Why does my image look really yellow when I'm filming indoors? What I think you're referring to might be the white balance. The reason being is that when you're filming, and this has happened to me earlier on when I was filming, sometimes if you're filming with automatic white balance, or maybe you have a setting to where, you know, the temperature, meaning like your image looks too warm. When I say your image looks too warm, what that means is that it looks really yellow. When people say your image looks too cool or too cold, that means your image looks, there's like a bluish tint on your image. And that comes with just basically the white balance, setting up your white balance. So I highly recommend manually adjusting your white balance, not having what's the word, automatic white balance, because you can tell when you're filming, especially indoors or outdoors, but sometimes light changes and you want to have a consistent look to your image. So what I recommend is manually adjusting your white balance before you start filming. So let's say you're filming indoors and you already have a good basically a look at where you're filming at for the majority of the time. Set your white balance, and usually what I do to set my white balance so that it's as accurate as possible, I have a white balance card. So there's different white balance cards that you can find, but some of them are on Amazon. Actually, a majority of them are Amazon. I got mine at Amazon. So some are at, you know, B&H Photo, Video. Any video, any photo website will have white balance cards. And mine isn't actually like a white balance. Some have white balance cards on a keychain. Mine is actually a foldable one to where it has like a gray in the back and white on the other side. I just use the white side. When adjusting your white balance, it's kind of different for each camera, but for example, my GH4, which I'm filming on right now, what I usually do is there's a white balance button. I press that button. It says adjust white balance. I press adjust white balance. And so I hold the card right in front of me and it takes a quick picture of it. And so it calculates the light in that area. And after that, it adjusts to the white balance. So let's say you're filming an interview, right? And you want to adjust the white balance. You have your subject sitting in the position that they want them to, or standing or whatever, and you have your lights already set up. So the best and the most accurate way to get your white balance is to get up close to the subject, put the white balance card next to their face, and take this quick snapshot, or however your camera does it, to adjust to the white balance. And then there you go. So that's the best way of adjusting the white balance, because that way your image won't look too warm or won't look too cold or too cool that way. So manually setting up your white balance is the best way to keep the look of and the color of your image consistent and more natural, actually. So question number 3. I'm gonna look right here. I have my questions right here with me. Trying to see. Okay, is it best to film manually or manual focus or autofocus? Here's what I recommend. I highly recommend that you film manually at first and not relying on autofocus. I know when you're starting out, it's really easy to film on autofocus, but if you really want to get good with filming on your camera and getting really comfortable filming with your camera, I highly recommend filming on manual, especially filming with manual focus. That allows you to really understand the position of where you are in relation to the subject, how to get into focus right away, and things like that. If you're filming on autofocus, it's kind of a crutch sometimes, unless you actually really need to film on autofocus. But if you're starting out, I highly recommend just filming on manual. Because the reason being is, if you're filming on autofocus, sometimes you can tell if someone is filming on autofocus just by seeing the quick jump from the background to foreground of the subject. and that doesn't look natural. So if you're filming manually and you're filming a subject and they start to move, the more practice that you get with a moving subject, the easier it'll be for you to know when to adjust the focus. So that way, it kind of looks a little bit more natural, and it's okay if you get out of focus for a little bit. But it's not a quick jump as like autofocus. So sometimes I personally film on autofocus, usually on follow focus. So if there's a subject and they're moving around and it's me just filming and I really don't want to worry about, getting into focus manually, because let's say I'm on a Glidecam, I don't have a third hand to adjust the focus. So if your camera is really good with autofocus or follow focus, for example, my camera, it's able to do that. So it really helps me, it really helps me to not worry about the focus and just focus on having a steady grip on the Glidecam. And that's basically it. So those are the top questions for right now. I'm going to just check if any of you have any questions. I know this might be a shorter one than last time, but I just want to get straight to the point. I appreciate all of you joining. Thanks for thanks for waving and saying hi. What's up? Let's see here. I'm gonna go straight to the top. Okay, here's one question. How do I fix my Zhiyun crane? The tilt is off and it acts slow. Personally, I haven't used the Zhiyun. I don't know how to say it, but the Zhiyun crane. I personally haven't used it. I know friends of mine have used it, and now there's a lot of great things. They're adding a lot of cool features to it. But I've used 3-axis Glidecam, or 3-axis gimbals, sorry. And while it's not exactly like a Zhiyun crane, it's similar in its makeup. When my 3-axis gimbal got off tilt just a little bit, I think it just depends on the gimbal. But the one that I have, it's a Turbo Ace, all steady, I think 6, maybe. Sometimes the tilt is off. Usually, best practice is to make sure that it's level before you turn it on and it automatically adjusts. Sometimes you might bump into it, or someone might bump into it and it kind of gets off tilt. So usually what I do is just bring it back to level, or going back and readjusting it when it's off, make sure it's level, turn it back on, and there you go. So hopefully that helps. I'm not exactly sure how to fix the tilt and if it acts slow, but hopefully ask someone and they might be able to help you. But I've heard good things about the Zhiyun crane. I know now that one of them, I don't know what model it is, but basically there's a little knob right there on the handle, and it allows you to adjust the focus, which is really cool. So you're holding it with one hand and on the pole, and then you're adjusting it with like your other hand, and that's actually pretty cool. Technology nowadays is advancing, so it's making filming a lot easier. But that's one thing I kind of want to, now we're on that point, I just want to talk about that just real quickly. Technology is great. It's adding a lot of great things to filmmaking, but if you're starting out, I highly recommend just learning, just going back to the topic of filming manually, learning how to film manually, and not relying too much on autofocus and all that. If you learn how to film manually and you get really good at it, autofocus, if you need to really film on autofocus, that just comes, it's a breeze. It's a breeze. Because the more you rely on automatic things, the less understanding you will have for the camera itself. So that's just my take on it. I know when I was starting out, I forced myself to learn things, learn how to film manually, how to adjust the camera manually, because if worse comes to worse, if you're dealing with a separate camera for the first time or anything else, you already know right away what the basic makeup is of a camera. So I highly recommend learning how to film manually first. Okay, thanks for joining, everyone. I appreciate it. Thanks for waving, showing some love. If you guys are getting some value out of this, just let me know. Show some love, show some hearts. Hello, how's it going? So just wanted to do a quick update, quick Q&A update, and that's basically it for all the questions. I don't see any more here as of now, but like I said, I do this every Thursday. I do a live Q&A on Instagram at Mike Zuniga Films. So make sure, if you have any questions after this Instagram live, DM me, send me your questions, and I'll put them on my list for the next Q&A. So thanks again for watching. Hopefully this helped, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.